he said to me, the reason why we make so many of our choices around the kind of content we publish, the different platforms and channels in which we publish, why we write at the level of detail we do is because success breeds confidence.
We've all heard the phrase, in order to get people to buy from you, they need to know, like, and trust you. But what does trust really mean? And how do you become trustworthy? And that's why our guest today is Margot Blumstein. She's one of the most prominent voices in the content strategy industry. She's the author of Trustworthy: How the Smartest Brands Beat Cynicism and Bridge the Trust Gap, and Content Strategy at Work: Real-world stories to strengthen every interactive project. She's also the principal of Appropriate Inc., a brand and content strategy consultancy based in Boston. Welcome to The Self-Employed Life, where we discuss business strategies, personal development, and daily habits that create sustainable success. I'm your host, Jeffrey Shaw. We go into business for ourselves to control our destiny, yet find ourselves in uncontrollable circumstances. I'm here to help. Hop on over to jeffreyshaw.com to find out more about my speaking and check out my small business consulting and branding services. The Self-Employed Life. This is business with a soul. Margot, welcome. I am so excited to have you here today.
I am so excited to be speaking with you.
Awesome. Well, this is a very necessary conversation, so I'm psyched to get into it. But before we do, because we're always wanting to attract more of what's going right in our lives, tell us something that's going right for you or something that you're really excited about.
I am really, really excited about promoting my new book, Trustworthy. And right now, so much of the focus around that has been not on the book, but around the people, because I've been doing a lot of outreach. And so many friends and colleagues have been offering me feedback, maybe as I'm creating graphics around it in Canva and bringing it to friends and saying, what do you think? Give me some honest feedback on the typography. And other people are promoting it out there. Having that kind of communication and feedback, even if it's someone saying, hey, you need to step away from that color scheme, I feel like that is tremendous. We can get so focused in our own stuff sometimes that we forget about the friends and colleagues and mentors that can really help guide our process. And that's what's been really giving me a lot of fuel and excitement lately.
That's awesome. I totally get that. It's funny. I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but you're right. I mean, a book is just such a tool for relationship building, and it just, you kind of live in a constant state of gratitude, I think, when you're putting out a book, because of the people that step up and help you. So I love that. I love that you said that. So, oh gosh, I'm so excited to talk about this conversation of trust, because I think we need to have a new conversation around it. I think it's been, kind of become a glib, sort of like authenticity. It's like people just toss it out, but they don't get to the meat of it. And I was thinking, as I was reading your book, about something I say in my keynotes very often, is that our goal today in business is to get our customers to say, wow, it's like you're in my head. Right? That to me is my goal in marketing, because I like to look at it as that mindset is the new know, like, and trust. Because I think marketing has oversimplified trust, honestly. I think it's become, if that's the goal, which is what we've been told, oh, you just have to get customers to know, like, and trust you, and then they buy. Like, that really minimizes, I think, the power of trust. And I think it's not so simple anymore. So kind of curious to do, your sense about that, about, trust is, we shouldn't just assume trust is giving, and it's not as simple as we just have to get people to know, like, and trust us. We have to earn it.
Right. And I think the issue around that, maybe it's not so much the verbs as it is the noun. Should we want them to know, like, and trust us? First, we need to make sure that they can know, like, and trust themselves, and that they can have confidence in their ability to understand our offerings, our products and services, that they can feel like, oh, I can make a good purchase decision here and invest my money in a wise way, because I feel like, oh, right, I can trust my gut instincts. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of problems over the past few years. That's why sales cycles have slowed down. That's why we see how a lot of marketing falls flat. It's because our audiences have a problem kind of trusting their own knowledge and kind of awareness of the world. And we can't blame them for that, because I think over the past few years, we've seen how politicians and media have engaged in a lot of gaslighting and telling people, don't trust the evidence of your own senses. Just come on, trust me, take this on faith. Don't look to do any other research. And when that happens, we see how people do kind of become blind to other information in the world. And they do lose the ability to do their own research, to feel like, all right, if I'm about to make some sort of big ticket purchase, or maybe try out a restaurant that I've never been to before, or go someplace that I've never been before, in order to do that, they need to have a certain sense of, I think, courage in their own convictions. But when they've been marinating in gaslighting for so long, that's tough to come by. And we need to do the work now of teaching them, all right, here's how maybe you can trust your knowledge, how you can go through a process of learning about a product, doing the research, and feel like you do have enough information to make a good decision. And I think we need to be in that business first of rebuilding their self-confidence before we look for their confidence in us.
Wow, that is such an interesting spin on it, because oh my gosh, I couldn't agree with you more. It's not unlike any other relationships, right? If you have, and here on the show, I often compare business to personal relationships or dating, what have you. So it's not unlike if you have, gotten into personal relationships that you thought was trust, and then trust was broken. Then you start doubting yourself. You start doubting in your ability to know whether you just think your judgment is really bad. And it happens in business too. When we have invested our time, energy, and money into a brand that we then find out breaks trust, we start doubting our ability to use our own trust, our own sense of judgment in the brands that we do. And I think, to your point, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, are people really that serious about their buying decisions? And I think we are, right? I think we are. And I think we want to be so careful on where we put our trust and energy. And we're asking a lot more questions. Is that brand diversified? Are they putting their money as a company where, in favor of or behind things that I agree with or don't agree with?
Right. And I think that's almost an area where we're looking for even more information now and taking those decisions, as you said, even more seriously, because I want to say, like, the last data from the Edelman Trust Survey was something like 60% of consumers in the US, and I think the number was fairly similar globally, want to vote with their dollars effectively, that they want to buy from brands that they feel like align with their values. And that means people want to know what those values are. They're looking for the brands with which they surround themselves to put a stake in the ground, to maybe share a little bit about their politics and the social issues that they support. And that didn't used to be the case. I know the thinking in business used to be, no, keep quiet about that. You don't want to turn people off once they start learning more about your organization. And how can we possibly play around now with authenticity with that mindset? That's kind of the opposite of being authentic.
And it's only going to be more so. I mean, millennials, Gen Z, these are the generations that are even more so really focused. They're asking the right questions. And I think for some of us as consumers, we've not asked the questions. I had an experience many years ago when my kids were little, and I started investing in, 529s and mutual funds towards education. And without ever asking the question, what funds make up that mutual fund? What businesses? And then I found out that there were companies in the mutual fund that were completely against my values as a parent, like firearms and tobacco companies. I'm like, how is that even a part of an educational mutual fund? How is my investment going towards a tobacco company aligned with how I feel as a parent in paying for my kids' education? And I literally felt like I was paying for my kids' education with blood money. It's like that, So I changed and found that there actually are educational or child-friendly mutual funds. Hey, do they get as much of a return? Probably not.
Actually, if I could ring in on that, not a hashtag, not a financial advisor, but I would say, like, in that realm of socially responsible investing, in general, like if you look at Calvert funds, that's where they tend to bring in more of those socially responsible businesses, maybe more B Corps and whatnot. They tend to do just as well as, certainly as other index funds, they tend to do just as well in general as vice funds. And I think that tells us that if you also look at the businesses that they comprise, that you can do well as a business while doing good. And I think more and more we realize doing good is a path to doing well financially.
Yeah,
Certainly,
it's just more so, right? I think when the example I'm giving is, gosh, it's probably 20 years ago or more, but that actually represents how things have evolved. I agree with you. The companies that do well by doing good are maybe where you do want to invest your time and your money. There are, kind of circling back to the idea, because I love this idea so much about, it's about us helping our customers trust in their judgment. And it puts the burden of responsibility on us to make sure that they are giving the right opportunity, the right information, which we're going to talk about, the really break the meat of your book. But you also say a couple things in the book that I think really stand out. And actually, one is really at the end that really stood out to me that embodies this idea. And at the end of the book, you pose this question: do you respect that your audience is smart and trust that they want to be smarter? And here's what I love about that, because the old mindset around marketing that some people are still holding on to is that we need to dumb down our marketing to the level of a 5-year-old. That literally used to be the role in marketing, like to understand that it's a noisy world and people are busy, and we therefore need to present our marketing at the, and no insult to 5-year-olds, because I tell you, 5-year-olds today are much brighter than they used to be. But I think that I love that you're bringing this to the forefront, that we need to realize how smart and sophisticated our customers are today. I'm amazed at how sophisticated my 3 20-year-olds are in their buying decisions. Do you sometimes wonder if your website is showing you and what you do at your best? Whether it's speaking to your ideal customer, are people coming to your website but not converting to customers? Or are you not super proud of the way you and your business are portrayed on your website? According to my research, 98 out of 100 websites are not speaking the lingo of their ideal customers. As a listener of the Self-Employed Life podcast, I'm offering you a special opportunity for me to help you out. I'll do a quick review of your website, complimentary, and let you know how you can improve your website to be sure you're speaking the lingo of your ideal customers. All you need to do is go to lingoreview.com, fill out a quick application, and I'll email you with some tips to improve your website. Again, that's lingoreview.com. I look forward to making sure you are putting the best of yourself out in the world and getting the results you want. Jason Dorsey was a guest on the show a while back, who wrote a book called The Z Economy and about Generation Z. And my youngest is Generation Z. And she is a smart consumer. Like, she does her homework, she does her comparisons, she makes intelligent decisions. And is that a big part of, I think, to have that better relationship with our customers, is to start with respecting the fact that, hey, guess what? They're smart and they appreciate it if we're going to help them be smarter.
Right. Well, and let me throw that back and say, when have you ever listened to a brand or appreciated an organization or trusted an organization that was condescending to you, that spoke down to you? That is not the path to trust, and that is certainly not the path to sales and customer loyalty. I think, and this goes back to your earlier point about how this is so similar to so many of our strongest personal relationships. The people that we want closest to us are the people that build us up and help us feel smarter and more well-equipped to engage in the world, not the people that tear us down. And I think that the same goes true for business relationships, both B2C and B2B. We want to surround ourselves, as consumers, we want to surround ourselves with organizations that make us feel smarter. And if you're a business that can help people feel smarter about a purchase decision, but then smarter about the entire product category, they reward that type of knowledge, that sort of teaching experience in the form of trust, as well as often in customer loyalty. And it's like some of the examples that I dig into in Trustworthy from America's Test Kitchen and Crutchfield Electronics, and even the original version of Banana Republic, they were all around, and they still are all around, making their audiences that much smarter. America's Test Kitchen, the chief creative officer there, when we were speaking, he said to me, the reason why we make so many of our choices around the kind of content we publish, the different platforms and channels in which we publish, why we write at the level of detail we do, is because success breeds confidence. And when people feel like, oh, okay, I totally made that souffle or whatever perfectly because I knew what I needed to know in the moment, whether I'm a novice or a more savvy chef, then they feel more confident in themselves, going back to that idea of self-confidence, as well as in the brand that brought them there. And I think, to your point, that's what savvy consumers expect now, because they expect that level of respect.
I think it's also a customer identifier. Like America's Test Kitchen, if anybody's not familiar with it, is behind the magazine Cooks Illustrated, which, if you've never picked up a copy of Cooks Illustrated, I mean, I love it because they're like intense recipes, but they make it simple, and but they're not, they're not light recipes, but they do such a good job explaining it. But my feeling is though that it's also an audience identifier, right? Because those are the recipes I want to go to when I feel like I'm more of a home chef, not a home cook.
Right. But I will say, though, I think they do a good job of meeting their audience where they are. So if you are someone that's like, oh, I'm making dinner for my family for the first time, and what do I need to do? You can pick up one of their magazines, and maybe you don't want to read about like the history of flour or 18 different ways to brown beef. And you say, just give me just the facts. You can get that version of the information as well. Maybe it's from their Instagram account, or maybe it's from one of their cooking shows. Lots of different content types within their platform, but they're all about kind of meeting people where they are and helping them feel smarter. And I think that gets to your point around how you self-identify. If you don't want to feel like an idiot, that's what you pick up.
Right. Oh, I love the fact they'll do like a whole article on salt. Right. I mean, it's anything and everything you've ever wanted to know about salt. So you suddenly feel smarter about salt. And I guess along these lines, and it's certainly around the topic of trust, I feel like there's this sense of shift in marketing that I'm all behind, because for so long, negativity, and I get it, anybody that follows my work knows that I'm all about psychology and looking at the psychology and feelings behind emotions and brands and why people buy, the psychology and flow of purchasing decisions. But I feel like there's a little bit of a shift towards an energy that's more aspirational than negative, because again, rule and business, and again, there's information that backs up that people need to see their pain before they'll seek a solution. That's human nature. I get it. But I also think people want to see where they're smarter. They want to see the aspirational, that as marketers, we don't always want to tap into their pain in order for them to seek a solution. We can also tap into their promise, what they're aspirational about, in order to say, and I think there's a little bit more of a shift towards those more tapping into their more positive sense of self, their more positive sense of being smarter and what they're capable of. Do you see that as well? And do you think that is part of how we build trust, is to tap into them feeling better about themselves, not always just pointing out their pain so they buy our stuff?
I do think that there's an element of that. And I think it goes back to that central idea that when people are researching a product or even just engaging in the act of buying a new thing or buying a new service, they're doing that from a point of optimism, from a sense of hope. They're thinking, if I read one more article, if I just keep scrolling, if I watch one more video, or if I buy this new thing, my life will get better. And they may not think that explicitly, but that's why. And I certainly don't want to say that shopping is an act of optimism, but I think to a certain degree, engaging in the economy in that way is a statement of of hope of saying, all right, this one more thing is going to make things better. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we just need that therapy to kind of placate other feelings.
But I do think, to that point, though, I do think, particularly under the current circumstances, I think there is a certain, hey, let me go, particularly around small businesses, right? Particularly about our local businesses. I mean, there's a real sense of feeling of, let me go out shopping. Let me stimulate the economy. Let me do something here if I can to get things going and keep it local or put it towards brands that I feel really good about. I actually do think there is a little bit of a sense of, let me do what I can do to help, even at quote unquote my own expense. To me, the whole issue of trust really plays a lot into what I've been referring to the time in which we're living in business. I call it the empowerment age, because we need to empower consumers to choose us. And the principles behind my work, and certainly my new book, The Self-Employed Life, is creating the environment from which people will choose you, right? So you actually maintain a fair amount of control. It's not just surrendering and accepting whatever happens. It's actually quite the opposite. It's the more you set up the circumstances for the results you want, the more likely somebody is to choose you, right? So there's a real power and control to that at levels I don't think we've ever had in business before. And I think trust is part of it, right? I think what we're really doing by helping them learn to trust again, we are empowering them to choose us. We're empowering them to live more happily. We're empowering them to trust on a broader level again. And I think that's really important work. But I want to get into the nitty gritty if we can. So, because I don't want to overlook the importance of your book. And so you break it down into the three main buckets to create trust again, which are voice, volume, and vulnerability. So let's kind of talk about each of them, particularly voice. And I have to say, Margot, I love that you refer to voice, brand voice, as both verbal and visual. As a photographer, you have no idea what that meant to me. Right. And you actually put a lot of emphasis on design as a voice of our brand. So support that knowing that you did that, because I think more people need to understand voice is not just what you hear. Voice comes through in design. It comes through in the visuals of your brand as well.
Right. Well, I couldn't agree more with that, because
you wrote it and I just loved it.
Well, and also like what you were just saying about empowering the consumer, I think you empower them in part by making your brand distinct through creating a distinct voice. That's what helps them understand who you are and how you are, and also how you stand out from the competition. And I don't want to put this on such like a high pedestal of saying what we do in branding is a service to the world. But
it is.
Said, when you make your brand distinct, you enable your audience to make a smarter choice, to say, that's the one for me. That's the one that aligns with my values. And so voice, by that, I mean the consistent and hopefully familiar way that you engage your audience through everything that you publish, through all of your touch points, through the visual and verbal communication of your brand. So I write a lot about how it goes back to your communication goals, maybe the hierarchy of message architecture. And that's something where I've been focusing really for the past 20 years of my career in content strategy, helping brands articulate those communication goals. But I think it's by understanding if what you offer is more around tradition or innovation, about being maybe more witty or more scrappy. It's by understanding those goals that then you can make choices around the sort of words and phrasing that you use, and your color scheme and the style of imagery. One of the examples that I share is probably pretty familiar to a lot of small business owners. MailChimp, they were a small business that started out to serve other small businesses with email marketing needs. And now I think they serve something like 60% of the world's email marketing messages go through MailChimp now. So they like to still point out, though, that they're kind of still Jenny from the block and can still be familiar and can still offer the same services that their legacy customers have come to appreciate from them. And they do that. They really drive that point home by maintaining a consistent voice over time. So you know what to expect from them, the sort of jargon and the level of detail in their content.
Yeah, I think, I think we overlook how design helps right? Design can be so helpful to people to make their life easier, whether it's simple design or just having everything that people need. Yeah, you can look at it as user friendliness, but at a whole other level, I think we need to, when it comes to brand voice, is to also have a visual voice that allows them to enter, to come in. And I will say, I actually, maybe it is a grandiose feeling, but I've always felt like we can change the world one brand at a time, because really what we're doing is changing relationships. For every time a consumer has a better relationship with a brand, you're increasing the optimism of the world. It's that big, especially now, it almost feels like, in some ways the bar is so low that when you have an exceptionally good experience, the next experience of the brand, maybe you're trusting a little bit more, and that's so important. You mentioned consistency, and this I think is so cool. And you talk about this in the book about brand voice, that really delicate balance between consistency, because I definitely believe in brand consistency, maybe too much. If anybody following me on social knows that, like, I'm all over the color aquamarine, but there's another lesson behind that to be revealed later. But there's more to that than that. But I'm very much into brand consistency. However, I love that you also bring up, like, the best brands also know when to put an emphasis on being unique and maintaining the consistency. Talk to me a little bit about that, because that's a tough balance. Like, in a way, brand voice consistency is almost a crutch, because you're almost guaranteed to, once you've nailed it, you're almost guaranteed to get it right. The big stretch is, how can you also be unique and maintain that consistency? And if you have any brands that you think do that really well, that balance between unique and consistency, I'd love to hear some things.
Well, I think when we talk about consistency, I oftentimes talk about the balance between consistency and novelty, because I think in many organizations, you're excited about the shiny new thing that you're rolling out, or shiny new promotion, or maybe the big reveal around your brand. And that's great. We love novelty. People prize novelty, but that can sometimes fall flat when people are also experiencing a lot of other novel things, like a lot of social upheaval or life in a pandemic. So one of the points that I've been trying to make around this is that maybe now is not the time for brands to reinvent themselves, for you to launch your new logo or new homepage or even new site architecture. Because if people have already come to know and trust you, and they understand how to interact with you, now is not a good time to ask them to learn all new jargon and all new taxonomy or nomenclature across your site. That puts additional kind of psychic weight on them, additional stress to learn in that way. And I think we're seeing that to a degree, even in things like public health communication, which I know is kind of far outside of the purview of most small businesses and most businesses in general. But I think we can kind of steal a page from that when we see different public health officials adopting a tone that is friendly and approachable, not asking their audiences to learn new scientific jargon or technical language. And then also presenting, like you mentioned, visual branding, presenting information in a consistent way through their updates week to week. When they're showing diagrams that people have sort of gotten the hang of understanding, and they know where to look on them for different stats or different information. I think that's good guidance that most small businesses can adopt too, where if you want people to sort of track things over time, or notice different things popping out, different new products or new features from your organization, keep everything else the same so that people can feel, I guess, a level of comfort with it. Maybe that's the next step from confidence, is comfort.
Well, that's funny. You're just saying that. That's exactly what's going through the mind, like how trust and comfort play nice together. I mean, we have the same comfort food every year for Thanksgiving because there's a trust in that we're going to get. And I tell a funny story in Lingo about how I broke that trust once, because I decided, I think from Cooks Illustrated, I decided to make really fancy, biscuits from scratch. And it was I put all this effort into it, but my family liked they trusted in what they were used to, which were the brand that comes in the tube that you smack on the edge of the counter, and the biscuits, right? So I went through all this effort, and everybody had a fit because they're like, how dare I break a comfort food, right? And I teach that in Lingo as a measure of familiarity, because familiarity and comfort go so nicely together, but so does comfort and trust. And I think as brands, we need to consider, are we the comfort brand for our customers right now? We may not want to change that. I would love to. I'm actually, my mind is wandering, I'm thinking, I wonder if anybody's done a study. I would think that comfort food is on the rise, like statistically, because I will tell you that I switched to a plant-based diet a little more than a year ago. The only thing I miss, I thought it was going to be bacon, but I actually don't miss bacon. The thing I miss is rotisserie chicken.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
it's crazy. It's the only thing I miss. And I think it's because it's like a deep comfort food for me, like that rotisserie chicken. And it's the only thing I miss. And I've wanted, there's the only thing I've craved being on a plant-based diet now is that, but I think it's because in a time of pandemic, like leave it to me to go plant-based before a pandemic. Like, I can't treat myself to plant, to comfort food, a lot of the comfort foods like mac and cheese. And well, I can if it's dairy free. But to your point, I love, and this is, you bring up another point about healthcare, and the example you give in the book, I really like, because I think another part of brand voice and the voice of trust that's so important is to speak their natural tone. And the example you give in the book, which I loved, was how, I think we all can get this, how medically so often we're told to go see a medical advisor, like, which feels really clinically, or it might be, talk to your doctor. But most of us know 90% of the time it's the nurse doing the stuff.
Right.
Right. So a lot of health organizations have adopted the language around healthcare provider. And it is more inclusive, and it's giving us a more simple language. And I think as brands, we need to stay on top of that all the while. And I'm probably just as guilty as anybody. Like, we can get too verbose and lose that feeling of natural language.
Right.
In our communications.
And I think there's also that balance between, and I think in the example that you're talking about from the book, I was talking with somebody that had worked with clinicaltrials.gov in the US. And then separately, I was talking with the team behind the NHS website in the UK, the National Health Service website. And they were both making the point that precision in language, as well as even visual precision in diagrams, sometimes is not as important as being approachable and familiar in how we convey information. I guess to put it more simply, familiar language is oftentimes more valuable and useful than precise language, because it gives people an entry point that they can say. It gives them that entry point where they say, oh, okay, yeah, I got this. I know how to use this information. I know now maybe the list of questions I need to print out to bring my healthcare provider, whether that is my doctor, my nurse practitioner, the clinician that I'm going to be seeing, my specialist, et cetera. It varies for a lot of people. And when we offer them hooks where they can essentially feel more confident that they know what they're supposed to do, and they can overlap their own experience onto the experience that we're presenting to them, then it becomes useful. And that's when we add value to our audiences.
Yeah, I think I go through that with who and whom all the time. It's like, I know it should be whom, but it just, nobody talks that way. And, so that's a big one for me. And also, not to start a debate here, but I feel this way about the Oxford comma, that I'm a fan of the Oxford comma, and I know a lot of people aren't, but to me, it makes it easier to separate the thoughts. And if you just list things without that Oxford comma, then it looks like it's this and that. But without that comma, I'm like, are you pairing that together? And I'm a big fan of the Oxford comma, and yet I see it get beat up a lot. Like, people think you're being too fancy by using the Oxford comma, where to me, it feel like I'm making it clear what I'm trying to say.
Yes. You can't see this, but I'm nodding like a bobblehead. Yes.
So that's my thing with the Oxford comma. I literally have seen debates going on social media, and most people seem to feel that it's too, it's too much, it's too snooty, whatever. But to me, it's clarity of thought. And that is our job as brands, to build trust, is to help them trust that they're not misunderstanding what we're saying.
Right. And I think when we make other choices that essentially, I would say, dumb down our language, that is condescending to the audience. So one of the things that I write about is we use language to meet people where they are, to help them figure out how to proceed. But then we're also introducing maybe other terminology, other perspectives to bring them where we need them to go. And by meeting our audiences where they are, we can help them get where we need them to go by offering them ladders, verbal ladders that essentially say, if this is your question, let's introduce some of the maybe technical language that you need to understand about that. Maybe in the form of parentheses or definitions, or when somebody comes into your shop and they're looking for a certain product, you could say, oh, you mean from this collection, and introduce them to maybe the brands that support it or other things that they might need around it. That's sort of the related items part
Yeah.
of brick and mortar shopping,
Yeah.
or in any kind of consultative conversation.
Absolutely. I for one, love that curated help. Like, I like people to help. I like algorithms following and making suggestions to a degree. But for the most part, I lean into it. I'm like, thank you for the help. I really like it. All right. So brand voice, certainly a part of making sure we build trust. Let's move on to volume, because this is a tough one, I think, for a lot of people, because, when it comes to building people's trust, we need to understand we stand in this balance between giving enough information, but not giving so much information that, like, for the example you gave in the book, I thought this is really interesting. Like, if we give so much information that they're not going to read all the way through or complete it, what they haven't read can make them feel distrust because they're wondering, what is it that they don't know about? That's really profound, but it's so true. And I think a lot of small businesses really battle. And unfortunately, I think a lot of them lean towards saying way more than they need to. Like, they're explaining their process, their manufacturing process, or their customer service process, or their, when you work with me, you're going to go from A to Z. And they're saying so much that it's too long for their customer to consume. But then what the customer isn't consuming can make them wonder, what do I not know about? So volume, really important. I think that's really, so tell me more about that.
Let me explain that a bit more. So if voice refers to what you say and how you say it visually and verbally, volume refers to how much you say, how much you need to communicate to support your audience in their path, in their process. And when we talk about how much, again, this is visually and verbally. This is, how long do your blog posts need to be? How many articles do you need to publish on something? But also, how many images do you need in the photo gallery? How many bullets do you need on the product description page? And also, how much detail do you need in your diagrams, in your instructions? Are you pushing this idea of simplicity for everyone and going more the path of diagrams from IKEA, where there's not a lot of detail, but it's usually enough to make you feel like, okay, I know how to put together this dresser, or I know how to hire somebody that can help me put together this dresser? Or is this going more like the path of really detailed, nuanced maps and diagrams, maybe in the guidebook around how to do engine repair and fix your car? We have different levels of detail visually and verbally there. And it all goes back to, are you putting a greater burden on your audience by giving them that detail? Are you adding this psychological stress that if they don't read every little bit, it's not going to work out well for them, and maybe they should just give up and walk away? Because that is the problem that the British government had to contend with. It used to be, when you were engaging online with content from gov.uk about information on paying taxes or getting different government services for your business, there were 9 different websites that you needed to look among. It was something like 75,000 pages of content that they had to maintain. And you can bet that it was not all consistent. And so frequently people would turn away from the government's website, the content that they had published, and instead look to guidance maybe from the Guardian's website, from the main newspaper website. And so they adopted the approach of saying, we're publishing too much. Let's only publish the content on which only we can publish content. So for example, it used to be that if you were interested in beekeeping, maybe in a rural area a few hours outside of London, you could turn to the websites of the British government and get information about what bees did well in different parts of the country, how you might want to build a hive, how to winterize your hives, all those types of things. And that's really information that should better come from different agricultural organizations. So they pared it back to say, well, no, we're only going to publish content on how to pay VAT for importing bees to the country, that sort of thing. That made a lot more sense for for their content maintenance purposes, as well as their users' needs. So they pared back from 75,000 pages to 3,000. And the way they knew that they were publishing enough content, and I think the way any organization can determine if you're publishing enough, if you're America's Test Kitchen or Crutchfield Electronics or the British government, you know you're saying enough when your users can make good decisions and feel good about the decisions they make. So the British government figured that out by bringing people in for user testing, user research, to ask them to complete different tasks and then to see if afterward, if folks were saying like, oh, that was it. Great. I know what form I need now to move forward.
Yeah, I think the example you give in the book that I love and I think is really relatable to a small business is that, I don't know that you use, I think you refer to traditional map, but I'm going to say GPS because I think more people understand that, right? We want our GPS to be highly detailed, right? Make this left turn. It's so detailed that now it tells you what lane to be in the highway in preparation of the exit. Like, I love that level of detail that they've added that because that didn't used to be the case, right? So now GPS tells you want to be in the third lane from the right because you have an exit coming up, like highly detailed. But I love the comparison to a subway map, right? Subway maps, because you're underground, there's no need to know every turn the subway is going to make. So it's a straight line from, Central Park to downtown in Miami and Manhattan. I forgot where I live. It used to be my Manhattan. Now it's Miami, right? And I love that comparison. And that's the key to me for a small business is to know to what degree does your customer need to know? Do they really, I'm not a car guy. I don't need to know how the thing works. I need to know how to turn it on. I need to know how to shut it off. But I think that map comparison, GPS, it's useful to have detailed information. Subway map, not useful. And it's up to the business to decide to what degree of volume do your customers need to have trust that they're making a good decision. I love that. All right, so now let's move on to vulnerability. All right, so we've got a theme here, all V's. We've got voice, volume, vulnerability. And I have to say, you kind of alluded to them a moment ago, but I love when it comes to vulnerability, you spoke about Penzeys spices. I actually refer to them in my book as well, because I think they're everybody's example of what can happen when you're willing to be vulnerable and speak up against political issues and everything that we've been told you should never do in business. Bill Penzy has done, and it's worked out rather well for them. So tell us the Penzeys spices story.
Right. So Bill Penzy, CEO and I believe president of Penzeys Spices, about 5 years ago in the lead up to the presidential election, he took to Facebook and he said, look, we don't support the policies of this other guy. We feel like his perspective on immigration is not our perspective. And frankly, we value immigration here. We think that as a business that believes that cooking is how you bring people together, we see how immigration really serves our needs. It's about bringing people together and supporting
spices
people
from other countries and
right.
Cuisines. Yeah.
And that was his point too. He said, before you say stay in your lane there, Cinnamon Boy, realize that this is our lane. So many of our spices are from war-torn countries and so many of our family favorites. You're talking about comfort food. So many of our family favorite recipes have come here on the backs of immigrants. We celebrate that. And that one post lost them a lot of customers. There were a lot of headlines about it. And then they started gaining even more customers than they had lost. They actually expanded their target audience because suddenly they had customers that maybe they didn't cook themselves, but they had friends and family who did. And they started buying spices from Penzeys to give as gifts to those friends and family. And they saw after every kind of socially oriented, issue-oriented post from Bill Penzy, they saw their sales skyrocket. I think they were up 50% year over year over the past 2 years.
Even if the volume of customers, because there was a moment in time when they lost customers for speaking up because people weren't used to it. But even when they lost customers, sales went up, right? Because they're those that felt aligned. And honestly, my feeling is I don't always have to agree with someone's politics, but I can still respect them for speaking up. I respect people taking a stand. I think What has driven me crazy many times with brands is when they stay in this gray area in the middle. And I think that does more harm than anything. It's like, I want brands to take, and I'm not saying this is true of I'm not saying everybody has to be outwardly vocal. I certainly am. And I know it's not to everybody's liking, but again, it's actually, it's aligned me with a lot more people I care about. But, I think respecting that they did step up, whether it's Penzies or another brand, actually says a lot about their willingness to take a risk. Right. That I feel like there's a set of values more important to them than the business, because, hey, if you're putting, I got a lot of pushback as a speaker. People are like, are you crazy being as vocal as you are? Like, that's, because the speaking world could be pretty conservative, and maybe the companies that would hire me would be conservative. And I felt like, well, I want to do business with people, I feel aligned to it. And I said, I respect them and I respect their alternate opinion. Hopefully they'll respect mine. But at the end of the day, I said, but I'm building, I'm building a who I am, not a persona. Right. So I think it's really companies that I think there's the companies, the brands that are willing to be vulnerable, even if there's a disagreement. I think there's a great deal of respect for the vulnerability and the willingness to take the risk.
Right. Because vulnerability means taking on risk in the hope of a greater reward. And I think that risk of making your values visible, that helps your audience find you. It helps you find your audience, and it helps your audience find you. And I think furthermore, the idea that business should stay out of politics, or we want to stay above politics, that in itself is a political statement. And it reflects privilege that is not shared by people that are affected by those politics. And I think if you're a business that wants to be fully engaged in the community that you are trying to support and that you hope will support you, the community of your target audiences, then I think that you do need to wade into that space. And that's tough. And I think a lot of businesses over the past year, when they've spoken up in response to the Black Lives Matter movement or to Me Too, have realized that, well, this is tough. We want to make a stand on this as more than just kind of flying a flag or putting like a sticker in our window that says that this is what we support. But that's a start. And now we need to look more at our own internal processes. Maybe, do we have fairly diverse suppliers if we're saying that diversity matters here? What are we doing to really diversify who we're bringing into our organization in recruitment as well? If we say that these things matter, let's fix them internally and externally. It doesn't mean that we have to wait until we are perfect, though, to engage in those external challenges. And I think that's really how business can be a force for good, by helping to move our society forward and empowering the people that do turn to that business, so that, as you were saying, they can bring that sense of empowerment and kind of good confidence in their own ability to make good decisions. They can bring that into the rest of the world to effectively inoculate themselves from gaslighting, to play a stronger role in their communities.
And to your point, it's not about, there's a duality to a vulnerability in a way, right? So it's not about being perfect. If you're willing to take the risk to being vulnerable and stand up for what you believe in, and hey, you're not going to be perfect. If you make a mistake, it's how you recover from that. It's being vulnerable to that actually can increase trust even more, right? I mean, early in my photography career, there were some things I messed up. There were photo shoots that, that I did, and, I made a mistake. Or I can remember one case where, I didn't neaten the shirt well enough on the husband that I was photographing. And then I didn't want to reshoot it. So then I promised them, way beyond capability at the time, because it was pre-digital retouching, that it could be fixed or retouching, and then it couldn't. And it got worse and worse and worse. And I wound up having to recover by saying, we need to reshoot this. Like, I understand this is your favorite pose, but it's making the husband's belly look bigger than it is because the shirt wasn't pulled taut. And but it was the admission of my vulnerability that I messed up that actually created a much deeper relationship. And I went on to work with that client for many, many years, and on a very personal basis. So I think a willingness to be vulnerable, and then being vulnerable when you make mistakes. If you make a mistake, is all the more opportunity to build trust. So, Margot, I love so much about this book that you are bringing, like I said, this whole conversation of being trustworthy to the forefront, so that we can, like I said, take it serious again. I think know, like, and trust as a marketing phrase has really minimized the power of trust and creating trustworthiness. I appreciate that. You've given us so much, but we're going to try to get just a little more out of you by going through our rapid round. And our rapid round is around the acronym of SELF. The S stands for sustainability. What's one daily habit that you have that sustains you?
Vitamins. And because of the pandemic, I switched them to gummy vitamins. So it's always like a little treat of vitamin D and vitamin C.
That's awesome. I don't think anybody's ever said vitamins, but I love it. I'm a big vitamin taker. I take them throughout the day because I don't like to flood my body with them all at once. So I'm often on Zoom calls. I used to tell people I'm popping vitamins, not pills. The E is in SELF is for elevate. What's one thing you suggest that we do to elevate our business?
I think mentor someone else. If it means guest lecturing and reaching out to students that are interested in small business or in your industry, do that. Get in front of them and help kind of affect their practice, or somebody else that is new to the industry, because I think doing that helps you keep your ideas sharp and also helps you test them with somebody that is maybe a little less jaded.
Love that. The L in SELF stands for let's go. So what's one action step you suggest that maybe we can even do today?
I think in this time of needing a lot, if you can take 5 minutes to give back by reaching out to your professional association, see what they need, see if they need more examples of the kind of work you do to, again, maybe mentor someone that's new to the industry, or engage in your community that way of just saying, what's a little something I can do that will make everything that you need and everything that you're doing for yourself feel that much better.
Well, speaking of vulnerability, the F in SELF stands for facing a challenge. What's one challenge you still face?
I think for me, it is around broadening my audience. I've worked in content strategy for about 20 years. And with Trustworthy, one of the reasons why I wanted to write it was to reach a bigger audience of people that maybe are in marketing or focus on design or that run small businesses or are in HR for small businesses, to reach them and say, all right, cynicism is a problem. The loss of trust is a problem. What can we all do about it? If this is everybody's problem, we need all hands on deck to right this ship. What can we do? And I want to work harder to reach that broader audience.
Oh, love that. So, Margot, tell us, what's the best way to find out more about Trustworthy, about your work, and maybe to be in touch with you?
Sure. Well, you can find me on Twitter at mbloomstein or online Appropriate Inc. That's inc.com, because I do love a double entendre. Appropriateinc.com/trustworthy is where you can find out more about the book, drop your email for the newsletter, or get other excerpts from it and all. And then you can find Trustworthy at Amazon or support the small bookstore, the local bookstore in your community. It's available everywhere books are sold.
Awesome. I'm all over that. I agree with that. So, and of course, you can also all hop over to the show notes at jeffreyshaw.com/podcast for all of Margot's links to her book and her contact information, etc. And as always, I try to remind you, make your life easier. I do try to make this a user-friendly experience, so maybe I can increase my trust with you. So follow us on, Spotify or iHeartRadio, or subscribe in Apple Podcasts to The Self-Employed Life. So hopefully make sure life easier by just episodes of wonderful content just showing up, so you don't have to dig for it. Again, everything you need can be found at jeffreyshaw.com. Margot, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And I appreciate very much the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
Excellent. Well, remember, you might be in business for yourself, but you're not in business by yourself. Be your best self, be proud, and keep changing the world.